So today we're doing the third of our 6 points discussions. We have 6 points and 12 months, and so our original thinking was every other month let's sit down and talk about one of our 6 points, and these are the 6 points of Sanshin's particular style of practice. So these are the things we inherit quite directly from Uchiyama Roshi and from Sawaki Roshi and from our own founder. And so it seems useful to actually give people the chance to hear something about these and to discuss and ask questions and talk about them. These are not things you're going to find in every Western Dharma center, right? Doesn't make what we're doing better or worse. It's just a very particular style of practice. So it's useful, I think, to consider each one of these points and what whoever the particular teacher is wants us to understand about this. So the first 3 of our 6 points come to us from Uchiyama Roshi. They are about shikantaza in the particular style of Uchiyama Roshi's practice and leadership. So this one today, the third of those 3, is the third under our sort of Uchiyama Roshi umbrella. The next one, I think, is our one about study, right? So that will have to do with Dogen Institute and some of the study we do. And then the last 2 are about work, believe it or not. So all of these things, come to us from a variety of sort of places in our lineage. So this one today, our third point, I have nicknamed Peace and Progress, balancing peace and progress. Now, not everybody likes that, including some of our former board members. One person in particular thought it sounded like a factory workers group or something, balancing peace and progress. If we go back and look at sort of the original about this, we would think this is not about Zazen. Why is it falling under Uchiyama Roshi's, points about shikantaza? The original way this was framed had to do with understanding Zazen kind of in a modern world, in the context of the modern world, right? Because of course this practice is quite old. So this is, again, one of the things that we inherit from Uchiyama Roshi's teachings about shikantaza. So when we think about Zazen work and study, we may think of those things as individual activities, right? I'm going to get out my book and study. I'm going to get myself on a cushion. I'm going to volunteer to do something at the temple. These feel like individual sort of personal activities. And we, go about these things in our active daily life of responsibilities in the world. So individually, we get up in the morning, we get on a cushion, we read a book, we go to work, we take care of the dog, we do our things, kind of in an individual way. And it can feel like we're busy. We have many, many busy, active things, right? And how do we sort of take care of ourselves in the midst of that? This thing that I've nicknamed balancing peace and progress, in a way that could be misleading, right? Because this is not about work-life balance, right? This is not about sort of taking care of ourselves in the midst of the demands of our work or our life, right? Or making sure we get enough time to rest or enough time to relax and do our hobbies or something like that. So as we know, the Bodhisattva maintains many kinds of balance at the same time. When we think about the work and the life of the Bodhisattva, we continually run into, the Bodhisattva is balancing this and this. The Bodhisattva functions in the intersection of this and this, right? We're constantly running into this image or this understanding. The Bodhisattva is balancing a lot of things. This balance is not, Bodhisattva is not ensuring this balance by making sure that there's 50% of this and 50% of that. That is not what's happening here. That's what we would typically understand balance to be. There has to be this and there has to be that. What did we forget? Esho looks like we need something, right? So it's not about, I'm going to hold 50% of this and 50% of this and the scales are going to be even, right? This is actually about clearly seeing that there is 100% of both things, whatever the things are. There is 100% of both of those things all the time. Right? So it's a difference. It's not there's 50 of this and 50 of this. There's 100% of everything all the time. So that's the more abstract view maybe, but of course for Uchiyama Roshi this was not a theoretical problem. This was his own life experience as a Japanese who was born in 1912, beginning of the Taisho era. He's in the middle of this real social upheaval, these sweeping changes that are happening in Japan because Japan is opening to the West again. Right? Not the first time. But we're really, suddenly there's much more communication, much more influence between Japan and the West. So in the Tokugawa, which was 1600 to 1868, Japan was pretty much closed to outside influences. And what that, sort of the downstream of that is social classes were quite fixed. There was not a lot of social mobility, a lot of change. There was a centralized government that held the power. That was very stable. Everybody knew how that worked. The size of the population was not growing or shrinking much, right? There was very little change. Things were very stable overall. So fixed social classes means there's no freedom of choice, but there's also no competition. So this stable population doesn't need a lot of advances in agriculture because suddenly we have to feed a lot more people. There isn't this kind of competition for resources, right? So there's a sort of inherent stable peace of mind that goes with that. We're not worrying about sort of competition. So instead of going toward development and progress and that sort of activity, the energy went into refining the culture and becoming increasingly sophisticated in terms of aesthetics and literature and art and the way the world gets seen, right? So there's this kind of inward development as opposed to growing outwards, growing with development and progress. There's this inner kind of growth that's about refinement, right, and aesthetics. So during the next period, which is the Meiji era, which is 1868 to 1912, this is the beginning of, now we're starting to see Uchiyama Roshi, Japan begins to be influenced by Western ideas about organization and government and society and how things work, as well as science and technology. So imagine the shock, right? Imagine the sweeping changes that are starting to happen now. So Japan suddenly has to study and adopt all these Western forms of progress because it's worried about being left behind, or it's worried about being taken over as a colony. It saw what was happening in China, right? And says, we don't want to be left behind. We don't want to be taken over by the Western, wave that's coming through. So we better get familiar with this. We better study it. We better get good at it ourselves. So that's great. Lots of forward momentum, lots of development and progress, but peace of mind gets lost as a result, right? The stability, the serenity gets upended a bit because of all of that. So Uchiyama Roshi saw what was happening, and it made him ask some pretty tough questions. He says, how do we actually find a balance between what I'm nicknaming progress and peace of mind, right? How do we find a balance? How do we navigate that in a world which is changing very rapidly, and not necessarily in a bad way? There's a lot of change. It's a lot of upheaval. How do we navigate that and not have, kind of get swept away, get our feet knocked out from under us? So he's thinking about how is Japan going to integrate this serene, stable, traditional, historical, rich culture with this progress-driven, Western kind of science, technology, change, development. So one way he went about that discernment was that he studied not only Buddhism, but he studied Western philosophy and Christianity. So he's looking quite broadly at the human condition, right? At the human experience, in this case from a sort of a spiritual standpoint, right? And he concludes, after all of this kind of study and practice and experience, he concludes that the answer to his question is that being a bodhisattva and working for all beings rather than for just yourself is the way to navigate that. So when we look at Opening the Hand of Thought, we look at his book, Opening the Hand of Thought, much of that is about this question of balance. If you read it sort of closely, you see he's really chewing on this question of how do we maintain balance, right? So progress in the context of this third point means our day-to-day activity in the world, right? So for many, many hours a day, we're out in the world engaged in creating and building and moving things around, right? This is a good thing. This is how we take care of our communities. This is how we take care of ourselves. Somebody has to be treating illnesses and, writing for the newspaper and selling us groceries and, doing all of those things. We want those things to happen in the healthiest possible way and the most sustainable way. So we also want our systems and tools to be effective and to be efficient, and we need to look for ways to do that. So progress in itself is not a bad thing. Nobody's here to say we should abandon all of that creative impulse, right? All of that drive. Nobody's saying that's a bad thing. But progress, of course, as we know, can encourage competition. So the result of competition, in Uchiyama Roshi's thinking, is there are a few winners and a lot of losers, right? Somebody's sitting at the top of that pyramid. The winners have the power and the money, and they're sitting up here, and then there's everybody else. So he says there are actually, if we're going to really look carefully at competition, there are actually no real winners, because achieving all the money and the power and everything leads to suffering. Why? Because we're fearful that what we have is somehow going to be lost. Okay, I'm on top of the pyramid today, someone's going to knock me off tomorrow, right? What does that mean for me? Or I could even convince myself that yes, I'm at the top of the pyramid now, but it's still not enough. I have everything, but it's still not enough. I still need to be grasping, grabbing, and getting more stuff, right? So rather than being contented, now I have everything I desire, I'm at the top of the pyramid, everything's good, rather than being contented by that, somehow, even though I've achieved all my desires, I still have no peace of mind. So competition is somehow creating this suffering. Maybe we even came to Zen originally, Zen practice, initially as a means of managing this kind of stress, right? Oh my gosh, it's not enough. There's never enough. So somehow Zen practice was going to make us healthier and make us wholesome, make us, fix all of our problems. So stress is a natural human reaction. Of course, it happens to everybody. We've all got stress at some point. This is what happened when we feel challenged. We feel challenged by something. Often it's some kind of unexpected change. I'm going along thinking things are good. Suddenly, wow, something happens and suddenly I have stress. In general, though, I think it's when we feel like things are out of control. When are we really feeling stressed? It's when I can't fix the things that I need to fix. Something's out of control in my life. There aren't enough resources to get this assignment done, whatever this is. I don't have enough time, money, information, skill to be successful at this thing, and yet there's this expectation on the part of somebody, me, my boss, my parents, my teacher, whatever. There's some expectation that something's going to happen, and I don't feel like I have what I need to get that thing done. Suddenly, stress, right? We all know what that feels like. So this karmic human form has, of course, some built-in physical and mental responses to deal with our experience of stress, to help us adjust to whatever new situation is arising in this moment, because things are changing all the time. So we stay more alert, we stay more motivated, we're ready to stay safe, to avoid danger. Something's collapsing on me, I'm going to run out of the way, right? So we have this sort of heightened response. And that's good because it can save our lives, right? It can mean that we're paying better attention and able to pivot and able to respond when things are changing rapidly. But of course, we know this is a problem when we never stand down. These responses are firing all the time. We never get a chance to relax. They just sort of never turn off. So human beings experience three kinds of stress. When we're out there doing our progress thing, human beings have three kinds of stress. Acute stress is that really short-term stress that comes and goes very quickly, right? It's not necessarily negative. Actually, it can happen sort of in the body when we're having an exciting experience. We're riding the roller coaster, we're playing sports, and we need some kind of short-term kind of burst, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It happens to everybody sometimes. We also can experience this episodic kind of acute stress, which is acute stress on a regular basis. This is the person who works in the emergency room, right? You don't get time to sort of regain your equanimity and your peace of mind because stuff is coming at you all the time, right? So, every so often there's the big car crash, or there's, the gang fight, and everyone shows up in your ER, and you're moving very quickly, and you're life and death, and then that wave goes out, and the next wave comes in. So you get this acute stress for a short period of time, and then you get it again, and then you get it again, right? We have situations like that. So we have something happening, and then, until the next one. Then there's chronic stress. Chronic stress goes on for weeks and months and a long time, and this is the stuff of marriages breaking down and issues at work and financial problems and longer term stuff. And of course, as we know, this will lead to health issues if we don't find a way to see what's going on and to regain some peace of mind, regain some equanimity, some balance. So some of this stress, all of these stresses, is not of our own making, right? Natural disaster, death in the family, economic downturn that takes down your family business. Maybe you lose your job or you're laid off because companies have merged. There's a serious illness, there's injury, right? We didn't create any of that stuff. We can't say, well, I did something to bring that on myself. This is just the world, the universe doing what it does. Those things are stressful, but they did not come from our three poisonous minds. We can't sort of say, well, this is something I created, karmically with body, speech, and mind. We still need to deal with those things as skillfully as we can, in as wholesome and healthy and sustainable a way as we can, but they did not happen because we created some unwholesome conditions. More often, though, I think our stress arises, of course, from our own acts of body, speech, and mind. So I need more stuff. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get more stuff because these five skandhas think I need more stuff. Or those people over there disagree with me, and I'm going to fight them as much as I need to get my own way, to get what I want. Every opportunity is an opportunity for me to fight with these people. Or, well, my suffering isn't my fault. The universe is out to get me, and if I don't put myself first, somehow I won't survive. Right? And all of these are sort of these karmic things that we do to ourselves and create suffering out of that. So we might not be telling ourselves those things in so many words, but if my company is competing for a contract, or my school is competing for students, or I'm up for a promotion or a grant or something, or I simply think my solution to the world's problems is better than somebody else's solution to the world's problems. That kind of self-clinging is not uncommon. We might not be verbalizing it that way, but if we look deep down, we're doing some of that stuff, right? So we can certainly sincerely believe that the work we're doing and the progress that we're out there to create in the world is progress for the common good, right? We can deeply believe that what we're doing is wholesome activity, and it is, right livelihood and right activity and right action, and that what we're doing is for the benefit of beings. We can sincerely believe that, and that can be true. But at the same time, we know we can also be unskillful in the day-to-day, right? You can work for the best nonprofit in the world that's, feeding children or curing disease, but you can manage that on the day-to-day in a way which is kind of unwholesome. So that's unfortunate for ourselves, creates stress for ourselves. It also affects the outcome of the project as a whole. So we need to manage, think about, be careful with this kind of outward activity, progress, development, creativity. We can't ignore our responsibilities in the world. We can't ignore our opportunities as bodhisattvas to use what we know how to do, our experiences, our background, our information. We can't ignore sort of our responsibility to do good in the world. Even though it might feel like, well, the best way for me to not have stress, the best way for me to keep my peace of mind, keep my cool, is to sort of back up, right? To go in my house and shut the door, to keep my things to myself in order to protect my peace of mind, in order to protect my equanimity. So we live with this day-to-day tension, right, between chasing after things and escaping from things. And this is not just in the context of this point, right? We hear this in our practice all the time. So it might feel like, well, in order to stay calm, in order to protect my peace of mind, I simply need to avoid taking any action at all and just be paralyzed. Well, that doesn't feel like bodhisattva activity, does it? Right? So we have this balance. So I think there's a parallel here with the balancing, peace and progress. I think there's a parallel here with balancing wisdom and compassion. Because on the one hand, we have skills and we have information that we use to solve problems and build stuff and work for the public good. As I say, curing disease and building infrastructure and making sure we have clean air and water and manufacturing, things we use every day, maintaining our communication systems, all of that stuff. All those things benefit from the knowledge we've accumulated, from the experience we have, from the training that we've gotten in school or on the job. Everything since we invented the wheel and have improved on it, built on it, right? Expanded what we know and how things work. So it's not a bad thing, I think, to be excited about how far we've come as a species, how far we've come as a culture, how much progress we've made in understanding how the world works and being able to create what we need and to sort of move in alignment with science and technology and how things are, how we're able to solve our problems It's not a bad thing to be motivated in our work to, do more, do it better, continue to grow, to help more people. That in itself is not a bad thing. At the same time, it's also not a bad thing to stop and look and listen to the world in this moment, both this sort of concrete manifesting world and also the world we can't see and grasp with the intellect. To pay attention to the myriad beings that we're in contact with and acknowledge their situation, right? To return to this sort of underlying harmony and tranquility and stillness that comes from not forgetting about emptiness. So this is not about my personal relaxation. This is about, oh, I see clearly emptiness. On that basis, right? So peace does not mean inaction. Peace does not mean crawling in a hole and pulling it in after you and never taking any action, right? That is not what peace is. Peace is not about disconnection. As I say, sometimes we might think, well, the way to keep my cool is to hide, right? That's not what peace is about. Peace does not require leaving society, leaving your job, leaving your sangha, becoming a hermit. It means freedom from disturbance. And I think that's a really interesting way to approach being peaceful or creating peacefulness in the world. It means freedom from disturbance. So we can be incredibly busy. We can have a lot of responsibility. We can be racing to meet deadlines and still be free from disturbance, right? So disturbance is interruption. Disturbance is a block or a hindrance or something in the smooth functioning of the universe. So you can move very quickly, carrying a lot of responsibility, and not necessarily be setting up blocks and roadblocks and hindrances and disturbance, right? You can move very smoothly through the world if we see clearly, if we know what's going on. We throw up those roadblocks when we're stressed. We want things to be other than they are. This is basic suffering, right? I have all these deadlines and I don't want them. I have all this responsibility and I don't have enough resources and I don't want that, Suddenly, the world is not the way I want it. Now we've got roadblocks. Now we've got stress. Now we've got imbalance. Now we have disturbance and we don't have peace of mind. So this is what it means, I think, to balance peace and progress, to do what we have to do in the world without losing peace of mind because we're clinging to some kind of expectation about the way things should be. The outcome should be like this, or the circumstances should be like this, and if I'm clinging to that stuff, right, I don't have peace of mind. So we can have 100% progress, and we can also have 100% peace. We can be moving very quickly, carrying a lot of stuff, and still not be hindering ourselves. So Uchiyama Roshi points out that the same tension exists in our practice of Zazen. So now we're back to Zazen, right? Now we understand why we're under this umbrella of Shikantaza in the style of Uchiyama Roshi. Because I think he's kind of setting up a parallel here. So, because he's always saying we're aiming for non-thinking in our Zazen, but usually we're wobbling. We're falling down on the side of sleep, or we're falling down on the side of thinking. And if you remember his diagram, opening the hand of thought, right? Here's ZZ, and here's the line. Thinking, sleeping, thinking, sleeping, thinking, sleeping. Here's another balance, right? So this is what I'm saying when we think about the Bodhisattva, here we are again. It's wisdom and compassion. It's peace and progress. It's thinking and not thinking, right? How do we carry all that stuff? So we're usually doing this wobbling, or as Dogen Zenji says in Fukanza Zengi, it's between dullness and distraction, right? So, dullness being the sleep and distraction being the thinking, or the disturbance, or the hindrance, right? So Shikantaza gives us the opportunity to put ourselves right in the middle of that intersection, peace and progress, wisdom and compassion, dullness and distraction, and to see what's there. So this is why this point falls under this umbrella of Shikantaza, because we would think these things are not related. Or we would think, oh yes, this is about using Shikantaza to maintain my personal peace of mind in the midst of this roaring kind of progress-driven world, right? So this is not the same thing. This is Shikantaza that's not aimed either at my personal development, my personal progress, my personal improvement. It's not aimed at that, and it's also not aimed at my personal healing, my personal relaxation, sort of protecting something about peace which belongs to me, right? It's about neither of those things. It's sitting right in the middle of 100% movement and 100% stillness. And that seems like a paradox, but we know that's what Zazen is, right? It's 100% movement and it's 100% stillness. So it shows us what it means to be a bodhisattva and to work for all beings rather than just to work for ourselves, which is Uchiyama Roshi's conclusion about this point, right? He's trying to navigate these two things. How do we do it? We function as bodhisattvas, working for all beings, not only for ourselves. He's not cutting out ourselves. It's, all of those beings are there.